Hello and welcome back. Our next student is Jesse Katz. Jesse Katz is a bassist, composer, and educator originally from Williamsburg, Virginia. He completed his undergraduate studies at the Frost School of Music at the University of Miami, during which time he was an active freelance bassist throughout South Florida. Jesse has been fortunate to share the stage with jazz luminaries Danilo Perez, Brian Blade, John Patitucci, and Maria Schneider. Jesse's committee member is Chair of Africana Studies, Dr. Mike Mason. His advisor is Professor Witness Matlu. Please welcome to the stage, Jesse Katz.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Jesse Katz, and today I'll be presenting my culminating experience, A Past No Longer Forgotten, a musical reflection of colonial Williamsburg's recent reckoning with its history as a fixture of the American South. Before I begin, I'd like to thank program directors Danilo Perez and Marco Pignataro, as well as my committee members, Witness Matlo and Dr. Mike Mason, for their mentorship and guidance throughout this year. I grew up in Williamsburg, Virginia. Present day, Williamsburg is a wonderful small town community, one that I feel so fortunate to have grown up within. At the center of town is colonial Williamsburg, a 301-acre area filled with restored and recreated colonial-era buildings in what comprises the world's largest living history museum. Of course, before it was an open-air museum filled with interpreters dressed in colonial garb, it was a real place, one that holds much historical significance as a major center of commerce in the American South. In the 18th century, Williamsburg was also the capital of Virginia. Like the rest of the South, Williamsburg's economy largely depended on slavery, and by 1775, enslaved African Americans made up half of Williamsburg's population. Put simply, the history of slavery is American history. But despite this, for many years, the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation did not include any of this history in its programming. It wasn't until 1979 that the first mentions were made of this massive part of its origin story. And though programming of Williamsburg's Black history increased over time, it never felt like enough. In more recent years, however, the Foundation has finally taken meaningful steps to more accurately and completely tell its history, its African American history. Through several important archaeological excavations dating back to 2020, Colonial Williamsburg has taken substantial and tangible, albeit overdue, action towards reckoning with its complex past. Through my compositions, I will highlight a couple of these excavations in particular, and it's my ultimate hope that my music can serve as a means of amplifying the important work that is now being done at Colonial Williamsburg. The Williamsburg Bray School is the oldest surviving schoolhouse for Black children in the United States. Shown here, just last year, the building was transported half a mile across town to a new location where it will become a central part of the museum. An estimated 300 to 400 free and enslaved Black children attended the school between its founding in 1760 and its closure in 1774, as funding was ceased in advance of the American Revolution. For over 200 years, the building was essentially forgotten about. After being moved down the street from its original location in 1930, as well as numerous modernizing additions over the years, the building came to be hidden in plain sight. Most recently, the building housed the College of William and Mary's Department of Military Science. Over the past decade, there was growing speculation amongst experts that this building indeed housed the Bray School, but it wasn't until 2021 that archaeologists were able to confirm this by dating tree rings in the lumber. Says Tanya Meredith, oral historian of the William and Mary Bray School Lab, and, as recently confirmed through genealogical research, a descendant of a Bray School student, quote, "Everything that I learned about my ancestors was wrong. They could learn, they did learn, they were able. Regardless of the intentions of the school, the children were still taking that education and possibly serving it for their own good and aiding in their community." And as summarized by journalist Ben Finley for the Associated Press, the Bray School contradicts the belief that all enslaved African Americans were uneducated. But the school's faith-based curriculum, created by an English charity, also justified slavery and encouraged students to accept their fate as God's plan. So to convey this particularly dark duality, I set out to craft a melody that is simultaneously pretty yet eerie. Similarly, there are a lot of Lydian and augmented sounds in the harmony, and though these are typically bright sounds, I aim to frame them in a more unsettling, eerie manner. Here's Bray School. First Baptist Church, thank you. The First Baptist Church of Williamsburg is one of the nation's oldest African-American congregations, founded in 1776. After years of secretly gathering, in 1818, the congregation built their first physical church on Nassau Street in Williamsburg, a building that would unfortunately be destroyed by a tornado in 1834. In 1856, the congregation rebuilt their church at the same site, the building that's pictured here. This stood until 1956, when the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation purchased the land and immediately demolished the church, paving a parking lot over the foundation, as well as the church members that were buried there. While the congregation rebuilt their church across town with the money from the sale, no amount of money could justify the erasure that ensued, as Colonial Williamsburg made almost no mention of what lay beneath the pavement until really just 4 years ago in 2020. That year, after significant turnover in leadership, the new president of Colonial Williamsburg approached the Let Freedom Ring Foundation, an organization dedicated to preserving the history of the First Baptist Church of Williamsburg, about embarking on an excavation of the former church site. And in August 2020, the pavement was ripped up. As poignantly recalled by Connie Matthews Harshaw, member of First Baptist and president of the Let Freedom Ring Foundation, quote, "Imagine being a child going to this church and riding by and seeing a parking lot where possibly people you knew and loved are buried." And says Alvine Conyers, member of the First Baptist Church descendant community, "I felt devalued and dismissed and just unappreciated as a human being. Colonial Williamsburg has a lot of reckoning to do." Though it's a bit hard to make out here, shown on the right is a photo that reveals intact foundations of both the 1856 and original 1818 church structures. So, in the spirit of ripping up the parking lot that once paved over Williamsburg's Black history, On Erasure sets out to convey a journey through serene, sacred space-making, violent dispossession and erasure, and triumphant reclamation. In the intro, I incorporated some of the rhythmic concepts we've worked on at the Institute this past year. Layered entrances starting with the guitar playing a figure that obscures the 1, and the bass is playing a 3/4 pattern that crosses the bar line since we're in 3/4 here. Here is An Erasure. Thank you. On the subject of early African American song traditions, one topic that has received increasing attention as of late is that of the early black fiddlers of the American South. Simeon Cy Gilliatt, an enslaved musician, was known to be the most famous Afro-American fiddler of the 18th century. And he has a specific connection with Williamsburg, too, as he appeared regularly as a court fiddler at the governor's palace, pictured here. Interestingly, Gilliatt was mentioned in an 1856 book by historian Samuel Mordecai as, quote, the most prominent member of the black aristocracy. It's notable that at this time in history, there was mention of a black aristocracy, whilst in reference to an enslaved person. This is another example of the duality that was discussed with the Bray School. All too commonly throughout history, black art has been claimed by groups with greater agency, giving no proper credit where it was due. This was especially true, of course, in the 18th century. and shown here is a fiddle tune found in a 1782 publication entitled Selection of Scotch, English, Irish, and Foreign Airs. Though published here under the name Poppy Ran Away, a derogatory term for an enslaved person, ethnomusicologists have come to the consensus that this tune was likely written by an African-American musician in Virginia, and perhaps Simeon Gilliat himself may have performed it. Here is a brief clip of Colonial Williamsburg musicians playing the melody. In my piece, entitled For Sigh, I wanted to give a more somber treatment to this above melody, in hopes of evoking the sensitivity of this subject matter. It didn't seem right to me to play a bouncy, dance-like rendition of this song in a major key, as it's usually played, so instead, Jude and I set the tune in E minor and improvised the form at a slower tempo, working only from the above manuscript. Here's For Sigh. Thank you. This next composition is named after the neighborhood in which I grew up, Grayland Woods. And yes, that's a picture of me as a child playing in a tree in said neighborhood. And I wrote this tune as a dedication and love letter to my hometown, but particularly as a means of looking to the near future and how I want to bring this project back home for the dual purposes of musical outreach as well as amplifying the recent work of Colonial Williamsburg that I've been talking about. In my composition, I incorporated Phrygian tetrachords that are sequenced down in minor thirds throughout the first line. Here's Grayland Woods. Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to thank everyone who is involved. So Artistic Director, Maestro Danilo Perez, Managing Director, Marco Pignataro, my band, of course. We had Aditi Malhotra on the voice, Jude Porton on guitar, Rella Olora on piano, and Julian Drumright on the drums. Thank you guys all so much for bringing this to life. The engineer and the mixing, Joshua Liu. Thank you so much to my committee members. I couldn't have done any of this without you, of course. My advisor, Witness Matlo, and Dr. Mike Mason, who's chair of the Africana Studies Department here at Berklee. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much also to the rest of the faculty here at Global, all the guest artists throughout the year. It was incredible to work with everyone. All the staff and the graduate studies and at Global, and all my classmates. And last but certainly not least, my family and my parents who are here today. Thank you. Here are just some of the cited works. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Congratulations. Up first, I would like to present Dr. Mike Mason.
So Jesse, I want to commend you on the level of respect and honor with which you approach this topic. You shared the history of the enslaved folks in this area, as well as allowing us to hear the voices of their descendants through the quotes that you had in your presentation. So thank you very much for that. And it's been an honor and a privilege to work with you on this project. So thank you for inviting me into the process.
Thank you.
We talked in our first meeting about why this was important to you. Can you share that with the folks here about why you chose this topic?
Of course. Thank you so much for the question, and thank you for the kind words, Dr. Mason. So to maybe zoom out for a second, Witness probably remembers earlier in the fall, I had so many different ideas and I was kind of circling around, hovering all under the same umbrella, but it kind of all came together and the vision narrowed as time went on. But I remember in the fall, I was reflecting on kind of who I am and how I came to be the person I am today. And a lot of it has to do with the 6 years I spent in Miami, Florida prior to moving here this year. And so we were thinking about doing a reflection on that place. And then I was thinking about that and comparing, contrasting to my hometown in Williamsburg, Virginia. And then it kind of dawned on me, like, okay, well, I should really dig into the history and reflect on where I'm from and make some music about it and do some outreach, bring improvised music there, because there's not a ton. It's a small town and there's not a ton of that. Currently there is, but not in a way that it could be, and not in a way that the people in the scene there, they're not being appreciated by the community in a way that they could be and should be. So it dawned on me I didn't want to shun my hometown and just go off, because fortunately through music I've been so lucky to see so many places, and I didn't want to be someone who just didn't ever give back. So that led me to dig more into the history and the real history, of course, of the place where I grew up. And through that I've investigated the chronology, frankly, of how, as I presented until 1979, there wasn't any mention of Black history, and really it's been quite an uphill battle continuously, and really until of late, where there's been some really inspiring, I think, finally, work being done. And so through that research, I came across the archaeological excavations, and particularly the careful manner in which the foundation went about that, which is making sure it's descendant driven. And I think that's such an important lesson when it comes to learning music. And a lot of what we talk about here at Global, any kind of music from any different culture of the world, it really has to be approached from the right place of openness, and in touch with those descendants, with the people who created that. Colonial Williamsburg, for instance, could have easily done something that was self-effacing, and frankly, they have been guilty of that in the past. but finally, I think they've done it the right way, approaching the Let Freedom Ring Foundation, doing it in a way that's open. So all that said, I really was inspired by that and resonated greatly with that. And it makes me proud of where I grew up. And that's something that I want to draw attention to and contribute my work to as well with my music. So thank you.
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Dr. Mason. Up next, we have Jesse's advisor, Professor Witness Matlow.
Thank you, Alex. Jesse, yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great watching, how this whole thing came about from the first day we met. And you were very dedicated, and I know you wanted this to be good. I could feel it from the first day that you wanted to do a great job and you cared about it. And that speaks to, how you were punctual in our weekly meetings, how engaged you were, and, doing the homework. So that really talks a lot more about your love for what you do and how much you care about things. And that really will take you a long way in life. We got to reflect on a lot of things, and I'm so happy that you eventually found something and went with it and committed to it, and I know there was a lot of information that we needed to dig and find, and it's amazing how the history of the black world, how rich and how big it is, and how much the literature still needs to grow. And it's people like you that, through the work you're doing and contributing to things that people don't know about or don't get to hear about, it's so encouraging that to recognize, and most importantly, in a way that also is in line with your music, finding your voice, your sound as a musician also has something to do with reflecting on where you're from. And Joe Lovano puts it very well, as he always asks the questions, where are you from? Right? Tell the story about where you're from. Yeah, it's a great one. So you've reflected that and put it on a way of knowing more about where you're from, knowing more about your people, and most importantly, caring about the accuracies and how the history has been presented, how you've known it, and how you continue to reach out even more, even deeper, and discussing and going deep into things that you did not know. And as you put it, some histories were erased, and that speaks on who controls the narrative. And we have a potential today with music, with the tools that we have, with the technology, we have the potential to bring all of this to the forefront that was left out. And it's great to see how you've put things together. I wanted to just very quickly, go into some of the, the music, but I'm really interested in how, Colonial Williamsburg, the foundation, has gone into this, and also recognizing that there's a need to reevaluate ourselves, and that's a very important thing that I hope everybody around the world should reflect on. The need to reevaluate where we are, where we stand, how we look in the world, and saying, okay, we have to highlight this. This is not right. We have to correct it. And in some instance, where there's doubt in the history and in doing things, damn, we have the science. We have archaeologists could dig and find things. We have the tools to look at things and say there's some form of DNA here. You cannot argue that because that's scientific evidence. And, you know, that is very important. And thank God we have the science to kind of help really set us straight on when we are in doubt of things. So the piece you wrote about the Williamsburg Brace School, you know, I liked how the melody kept going, because we're talking about something so tragic, and yet, you know, there's well, that is reflected. There's a melody that's kept going, and there's a melody of hope, you know, with all that with that melody, I'm hearing, I live, I thrive, I'll keep on going. You know, that's the vibe I'm hearing, you know, and, you know, I'd love to hear that, you know, added with some lyrics there. And thanks, Aditi, for the great work you did. Yeah. And the Anirasia, the First Baptist Church, that sense of the depictions through sound, while there's a melody going on, and all of a sudden there's a sound that's happening, some sense of a disruption. In a way, I felt a sense of a disruption on a way of a people's way of being that was happening. There's this, all of a sudden, a disruption, and things, you know, becoming chaotic in a way, as a true reflection on how life can be. Life cannot be one-dimensional. But that melody kept going, you know, there's a sense of hope that I kept hearing even inside of that. And, you know, you beautifully made a great dedication to Psy, and with your own title, For Psy. And I like how the care you've went in approaching that song, and what you're saying, that I didn't want it to be just a dance, a happy dance, you know, but I wanted it to reflect how I feel. I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to think about tonality, where, you know, where it's at, how you processed that story of this fiddle player, and how you thought about it as someone who, you know, it's a treasure of Colonial Williamsburg. Those are the names that, you know, when we're talking about music, have to be mentioned. And you've done a great job with that dedication, with that piece.
Thank you.
I would like to, in a form of a question, to give you an opportunity to tell us more about the future of this project. I know I can see you going around the world doing presentations. I could see you developing a course on this. It falls within the African American literature. I could see you going home, working with this foundation, when they're talking about the history and all the involvements they're doing, all the events they're doing. They need music that's in line with exactly the work that they're doing. So I would love to see you collaborate with them. All right, I'll give you a chance to tell us about the future project.
Thank you so much. Yes, so there's so much that I'd like to do with this project, and so much more work to be done research-wise. But yeah, first of all, I'd love to take it home and perform it in Colonial Williamsburg. And particularly, more than just a concert, I'd love to have a multifaceted, interdisciplinary presentation that includes the music, of course, but then lectures thereafter with archaeologists and different historians from the foundation, people who are different scholars, people who really know what they're talking about. And I'd love for this concert, for the community, I'd like to have it be funded so that it can be free for people to come see. And I'd like to let the music be an amplification and a way to bring people to the people who really have done the work and research and need to be heard. Shown here, there's a new building set to open in 2026 in Colonial Williamsburg, the Campbell Archaeology Center. It's under construction now, and it's going to be a massive facility solely dedicated to the archaeological work of Colonial Williamsburg. Currently, CW has an art museum, and they have exhibits that show some of the stuff they've excavated, but most of it is all just in a warehouse being stored, and this is going to allow it to be public facing and so people will be able to really see the history more. So I'd love to perhaps do a presentation in conjunction with the opening of this center. And in the meantime, the CW Art Museum has a performance space and a concert hall that this could perhaps be presented within. Outreach, I think even before I settled on focusing on amplifying this archaeological work, I knew I wanted to do musical outreach with my hometown. Just as I said before, bringing improvised music back home and lifting it up in a way that it really deserves to be for both the musicians and the audiences. There's really a lot of cool people back home who love music, and I think they would love this too if there was more of it going on. So I want to bring that back in the form of community concerts, and then also do workshops and master classes in the schools. I was fortunate to come up in really good public school music programs, but there was not as great of an emphasis on improvised music as there was orchestra music and wind ensemble music. So I'd love to mitigate that gap a bit. And even in schools, I could do purely musical workshops, but also the same presentation where we talk about this history too. It really does go hand in hand. No one is separate from the other. Of course, there's so much more reflection and digging, I think, to be done with all of this. Like every time I would discover, one new thing, it's like it opens up a branch of 10 more things. So there's so much more music, I think, to be written, and research. There's tons of research that it just, as I said, kept expanding. And there's several people I'd love to interview. If I could be so fortunate, especially Dylan Pritchett, who's a founding member of CW's African American music program back in the 80s, and he was also the first supervisor of the CW's African American interpreter programs. And he's still involved. He's not in that role anymore, but he's still involved, and I'd just love to get a chance to speak with him and talk about how everything unfolded in the 80s there. As CW embarked on this long overdue work. And then I'd love to, as I think you brought up, Witness, I'd love to bring this music elsewhere too. I'd love to apply for grants, hopefully, to bring it to some underserved communities throughout the American South. And in the same way that CW has been doing this reflecting and doing this work, I'd love to have the music be a chance to inspire people to reflect on their own town's pasts. In a way, Williamsburg's at a great advantage by having such a significant institution, such as Colonial Williamsburg, and also the College of William and Mary next door. But many other towns don't have these grand institutions with the ability to get federal grants for research. But these places all have their local histories, much of which has been suppressed over time. And by bringing this music to those communities, I want to have people be able to enjoy the music, but also inspire this kind of reflection. So thank you so much for the question.
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Witness, for the comments and questions. We have Professor Patricia Zarate. Would you like to give any comments or questions?
Yes, I want to thank you and also congratulate you for a wonderful presentation. I want to mention that it takes a brave young man like you to talk truth to power within that power. Congratulations for doing that. Also, I want to encourage you to keep using that privilege that you have to keep talking and literally, in your case, de-earthing the profoundly violent history of colonization. You are doing it with music, and it makes the process a lot easier to digest. So continue doing that. You're going to make a big impact. Thank you.
We have Artistic Director Danilo Perez.
Jesse still remembers our first meeting, and you throw up all these ideas and Miami and chaos. I love that. I mean, I don't know why. It's that process where you start from chaos, just throwing ideas. It's one of the most rewarding things for me. It seems like all over the place, right? But it has to in order to find order. And we always start there in order to break through this new connection for us, to give meaning and purpose to what we're doing in our life. I want to congratulate you for the strength and the bravery to address something very difficult and use music as the catalyst and the power for change. And I just have a musical suggestion for on erasure. I hear that as a suite, like a long thing, you know, like the first part and the second is so beautiful. And I think you have a beginning of a play here, actually. You know, it's a play. And you might want to start touching base with people who are into the images, and because these things, creating an interconnected experience, it will multiply the impact. And I'll be there the first time. When you premiere, I'll be buying my ticket, be there. So thank you very much. It's been wonderful working with you. In Detroit, I got to see a lot of Jesse and how hard you work on it inside the context of being on the road. You know, I felt like we were on the road together, and your discipline, your commitment, and the responsibility of carrying on what you're doing with your bass. And I will never forget that you blew me away the first day. I'm like looking at a bass, and I thought, this guy is from another planet, because he was playing backwards, like the way. And I never had that experience with the bass like that. Yeah, he looks like he's carrying like a spaceship or something. So I think you are living with a spaceship now. A spaceship and a lot of direction in your life. Compliment to you. It's been nice working with you. And I'm looking forward to the future, man.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you so much.
Another round of applause for Jesse.
Thank you.